had to ask is you were talking about the bike riding. I've got 2 little boys, and my oldest just for the first time got hit by a baseball pitch, right? So he's been playing baseball for about a year and a half, but he just learned that like, oh, when this hits you, it hurts. And I'm watching in real time what you're talking about as we speak, right? The experiential intelligence being formed on this subject. Okay, wait, this hurts. And I'm watching it all of a sudden overnight change his belief system about a sport that he loved. And the thing he loved most was hitting, right? We all have that. Many of us, I'd say most, instead of really figuring out how to overcome it and leverage that as part of our story, we try to push it aside, avoid it, myself included. Do you have some tips or answers for us on how can we take those tough experiences that have set us in a certain way, a mindset, and flip it around?
There's research on this. There's a guy named Richard Tedeschi. He wrote an article called "Growth After Trauma." It's like, we're talking about real trauma,
Yeah.
whether it's war or whether it's something else. And the concept is called post-traumatic growth, which basically means that if something really bad happens in our lives, and he looked at a lot of, people who have had these traumas, it can change their entire outlook on life, create greater purpose, and shift what they decide to do in their work or the kind of relationships they want. And it's not that trauma happens and then you're in the death spiral. It's that trauma can happen. And he looked at people who actually looked at trauma, whether it was a health issue or whatever, and had that transformative experience. And so there are some things that can be done. One, I think the most powerful thing is what Tedeschi calls disclosure. And it's basically being vulnerable and revealing to someone you trust your experience and having a conversation to understand your experience better through someone else's eyes and get reflection back that perhaps how you've responded, isn't dysfunctional or is validating. Now that's one thing you can do. When you apply all of that to then experiential intelligence, we're talking about how'd you get smart from this thing? I mean, that's the essence of it. Well, okay, what did that impart onto you? How do you look at the gifts, as maybe as difficult as those things were that happened, the gifts that you now possess because of that thing that happened, not despite of it. And so it's in self-reflection. You can meditate, you can see a therapist, you can see a coach, you can just talk to somebody you trust, but putting a lens on it around the assets that your experience gave to you and getting some reflection, that's like number one. And it's not rocket science. It's not hard to do. You just have to find that trusted person to be a little bit vulnerable with.
This is perfect. It's perfect.